Imagine living inside the coldest freezer in the world. But what if that freezer was your home, your neighborhood, or your city? This is the coldest inhabited place on the planet, a city called Yakutsk. Here, when people breathe, the air crackles. It's the sound of breath turning into ice crystals before it hits the ground. A ground that houses cannot touch, because if they did, they would sink. Get comfortable, hit like, and open your eyes wide. Because today on Uncensored World, you're going to discover what it's like to live in a place where nature doesn't want you to live. Let's get started. In the heart of one of the coldest and wildest regions on the planet lies Yakutsk, a city that nature never intended to support life, but which, against all logic, remains inhabited. Here, temperatures drop to 70 degrees below 0 Celsius, or minus 94 degrees Fahrenheit. And strange as it may seem, in a place like this, even a bear can freeze. Yakutsk is located in northeastern Siberia, within a territory so vast that it is difficult to comprehend even when looking at a map. The Republic of Sakha, also known as Yakutia, is larger than France, Spain, Germany, and Italy combined. And yet, it is one of the least inhabited places on the planet. To understand it better, less than 1 person per square kilometer lives here. In other words, if a city like New York had the same population density as this region, instead of 8 million people, only about 250 would live there. That's why in Yakutsk, you can see entire streets without people, miles and miles of frozen land without a single light, a gigantic territory where emptiness is the norm and human presence is the exception. And it's no coincidence. Almost no one lives here because living here is not only difficult, it's a constant struggle against the cold, distance, and isolation, as you'll now see. We are a few degrees from the Arctic Circle, in one of the coldest areas inhabited by human beings. Yakutsk is also the largest city in the world, built on continuous permafrost, which is a layer of ground that remains frozen throughout the year. It is not surface ice. It is solid ground, frozen for thousands of years, on which the entire city rests. That is why, as you will soon discover, the buildings float. This is because, for much of the year, the cold controls everything: the way people walk, the way they work, the way they build, and also the way they interact. That's why in Yakutsk, houses can't touch the ground. This reality has nothing to do with architecture or modernity, but with survival. Because here, human heat, the same heat that keeps you alive, would be capable of melting the frozen ground. That's why if a house touched the ground, it would end up sinking and breaking. This reality means that in Yakutsk, buildings do not rest on the ground but float on stilts, allowing the frozen air to keep the ground frozen. This explains something that we will discover on this trip, as heat is necessary, but also dangerous. Because when the environment is so extreme, it's not just your options for living that are reduced. Your options for leaving are also reduced, as are your options for choosing who you share your life or your intimacy with. In recent years, many young women have left Yakutsk in search of less harsh cities and more opportunities. On the contrary, many men stay tied to their work, their land, and their families. The result of this is an even smaller world. Here you don't choose who you spend time with. You always do it with the same people. A city where anonymity is almost impossible, although we'll see this later when you understand what everyday life is really like here. In Yakutsk, the cold is not a passing sensation. It's not something you notice and that's it. Here you don't need to run, fall, or make a serious mistake to be in danger. You just need to stand still for too long. That's why the routine changes even before you leave the house. Walking here is not walking as we know it. Before stepping outside, people put on 10, 12, or even more layers of clothing, protecting every inch of their bodies from the extreme cold. It's not an aesthetic choice. It's a matter of survival. All that equipment adds more than 10 extra pounds to the body. Every step becomes slower, heavier, and moving requires constant effort. Simple actions, such as crossing a street or carrying a bag, become exhausting tasks. reminding you at every moment that even getting around here comes at a physical price. Your body moves slower, but the cold doesn't wait, because the longer you take, the more energy you lose, and when your energy drops, the risk becomes greater. And that's what makes Yakutsk more than just a cold city. It makes it a place where just enduring is a constant struggle. This is noticeable in something as simple as breathing, because here you can hear yourself breathe. Each exhalation produces a dry sound, as if something were breaking around you. It's not your imagination. It's the warm vapor from your lungs turning into ice crystals before it hits the ground. If you don't go out prepared, the effects appear in seconds. The reason is simple: water. The human body contains water in the skin, hair, eyes, and every exposed tissue. At extreme temperatures, that moisture begins to freeze almost immediately. Eyelashes harden because the vapor from your breath freezes on contact with the air. Eyebrows become covered with frost. Facial hair turns white because ice crystals stick to every exposed hair. Breathing deeply also becomes painful. It is not a superficial stinging in the throat, but an internal sensation. The extremely cold air suddenly cools the lungs and airways, causing a cold burn that feels like reverse fire. In Yakutsk, temperatures close to 64 degrees below 0 Celsius have been recorded, which is equivalent to about 83 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. At these temperatures, these effects are neither an exaggeration nor an extreme anecdote. They are pure physics. And in some areas of the region, temperatures have dropped even lower, exceeding 71 degrees below 0 Celsius, more than 96 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit. As you can imagine, at these temperatures, the cold ceases to be a sensation and becomes an immediate physical process. It is the same process you can see at home when you put water in the freezer. The difference is the scale involved. A domestic freezer usually operates at around 18 degrees below 0 Celsius. In Yakutsk, the air can be more than 3 times colder than that. That is why this city could be described, without exaggeration, as a giant open-air freezer, where the environment does in seconds what an appliance takes hours to achieve. And when the air reaches those temperatures, any exposed part of the body begins to freeze if it is not protected in time. First, you lose sensitivity. Then the tissue begins to be damaged. Realities that we would not take into account elsewhere can be fatal here, which is why metal, for example, is especially dangerous. On the coldest nights, even glasses, a ring, or a metal zipper can stick to the skin in seconds and tear it off when removed. That's why in this place you don't go out without thinking. Even if you do everything right, the cold always has the last word. And if you think this only affects people, wait. At the beginning, we mentioned that even a bear can freeze here. It sounds impossible. But now you're going to understand why it's true. But first, a quick question. Could you live in a place like this for an entire winter? Yes or no? Or leave a 9 in the comments if you dare to try. We usually think of some animals, especially those that live in extreme regions like these, as if they were invincible, as if the cold or the wilderness couldn't touch them. A bear has thick fur, a layer of fat that protects it, and enormous strength. It is designed to withstand extreme conditions. But that doesn't mean it's immortal, especially in places like Yakutsk. In this region, reindeer, wolves, and moose have been found dead, completely frozen, after long days of extreme exhaustion. Not because they were weak, nor because they made an obvious mistake, but because the cold, combined with fatigue, is unforgiving. They are huge animals, capable of traveling great distances, that simply run out of energy. And when the body can no longer generate enough heat, the cold does the rest. Something similar happens to bears in extreme situations. Sudden changes in temperature, injuries, falls into icy water, hunting traps, or failure to find shelter can push even these animals to the limits of their endurance. In such scenarios, an organism designed to withstand winter can lose the battle. And that is what is truly disturbing. Not that it happens in extreme cases, but that it can happen. Because if the cold is capable of overcoming creatures that have been adapting to this environment for thousands of years, the message is clear. There are no guarantees for anyone here. However, not all animals lose. In Yakutia, there is a stark contrast. Here lives an animal known as the Yakut horse, a local breed capable of surviving temperatures that would kill most domestic species. These horses spend the winter outdoors, digging through the snow with their hooves to find food, and enduring the extreme cold without artificial shelters, something unthinkable in almost any other part of the world. But in Yakutsk and much of Yakutia, this animal is not just a biological curiosity, it is a key part of everyday life. It is used for transportation in rural areas, for work, and also as a source of food. Its meat and fat are part of the traditional diet, precisely because they provide the energy needed to withstand the cold. Even its skin is used for clothing and shelter. Here, the horse is not a romantic symbol. It is a tool for survival. This difference explains everything in this land. It is not enough to be strong. It is not enough to endure. You have to be made for this place. Just like the animals that manage to survive here, the people who decide to stay in Yakutsk do not do so for comfort. They do it because they have learned to live differently. A way that surprises anyone who arrives for the first time, and that we are now going to learn about. But first, if these kinds of stories make you look at the world differently, subscribe now to Uncensored World so you don't miss any of the videos we make every week. Because here we don't just travel, we discover the reality of the world like nowhere else. In Yakutsk, as you know, the day begins long before you leave home. For them, eating is not a social act or an occasional pleasure. It is a matter of necessity to fill the body with energy. That is why the traditional diet is designed to generate internal heat. Lots of fat, lots of protein, few fresh foods. Not because they like it, but because here, the body needs constant fuel to keep from getting cold. Frozen meat and fish are not stored in refrigerators. In fact, many households use the outdoors as a natural refrigerator, because the air outside is colder than any domestic freezer. Food is cut when it is rock hard and eaten in thin slices. One of the most common dishes is stroganina, frozen fish cut into very thin slices. This is not unusual or an exotic tradition. It is a quick and efficient way to obtain energy without losing heat. They do not waste energy using other methods that may be more common, such as those most of us are familiar with, and in each of these cuts, they consume as many calories as possible. But adaptation does not stop at food. The entire city operates under one basic rule. Nothing can stand still for too long, especially cars. That's why, especially in winter, many drivers don't turn off their engines for hours, or even days. Here, turning off your car isn't saving money. It's risking not being able to start it again, because if the engine cools down completely, the oil becomes so thick that the vehicle won't start again. The streets of Yakutsk are full of smoking cars even when they are parked. But here the smoke does not rise. It also freezes, staying close to the ground and forming an artificial fog that reduces visibility. All this, combined with the constant sound of engines, reminds us that this reality is not noise. It is the best sign that Yakutsk is still alive. It is a constant reminder to its inhabitants, and to the few tourists who arrive each year, that this city cannot afford to shut down. Here, stopping is simply not an option. Here, pipes, cables, and basic systems cannot go underground because the frozen ground would break or disable them. Water is also another daily problem. In many cases, drinking water is obtained by melting blocks of ice collected from completely frozen rivers. In addition, pipes can easily freeze, which is why much of the infrastructure is not buried underground. In some buildings, the pipes are insulated or suspended. In other cases, water is stored and managed with extreme care, because a broken pipe in the middle of winter is not a minor malfunction. It is an emergency. When water freezes inside a pipe, it expands. If the flow continues, the pressure increases until the pipe bursts. And at those temperatures, repairing a leak is neither quick nor easy. Inside the houses, the contrast is stark. Outside, the cold kills. Inside, the heat is intense. Many people sleep in light clothing, even in their underwear or without it, because the heating is turned up to the maximum. The problem is the constant change. Going outside and coming back inside means subjecting the body to extreme thermal shocks several times a day, sometimes with a difference of more than 100 degrees Celsius. That's why, in most homes, clothes are never completely put away. They are left ready, at hand, ready to be put on in seconds. Here, there is no room for improvisation when the doorbell rings or when you have to leave in a hurry. And although it may seem strange, hygiene also adapts to the environment. Bathing in Yakutsk is not a trivial matter. Hot water is a much more valuable resource than in most temperate countries, a reality that many people do not consider important, but which here shapes the daily routine. Heating water takes time, energy, and planning, so bathing becomes more of an organized ritual than a quick and automatic habit. Everything is done with the aim of not losing heat any longer than necessary. That is why, in many homes, a full bath is not a daily occurrence as it is in other parts of the world. In winter, many people wash themselves in parts during the week and reserve the full bath for specific moments when there is enough hot water and time to do so safely. Any failure in this process means unnecessary cold. Here, even something as basic as washing requires forethought, because the body cannot afford to cool down without consequences. Even human relationships are affected by this context. The cold does not invite long outings or impromptu encounters. Social life takes place in closed, controlled, warm spaces. The outdoors is not a place to stay, it is a place to pass through just enough. Because if you do it wrong here, it can cost you your life. Understanding how people live here is key to understanding why the human body never fully adapts. Not because it is weak, but because the basic rules that most of us live by simply cease to function in this place. In Yakutsk, the problem is not just the cold, it is also the light, or rather the lack of it. During the winter, the days shrink until they almost disappear. We're not talking about sad or gray days, but days with barely 3 or 4 hours of real light, a low sun, without strength, unable to activate the body as it would in other latitudes. That sun appears and disappears without setting a clear rhythm. There is no sunrise that fully awakens you, nor a sunset that indicates it's time to stop. The day loses its structure, and time becomes diffuse, as if every day were the same. The human body functions with very precise internal rhythms: sleeping, waking up, producing hormones, regulating mood. All of this depends to a large extent on natural light. And when light ceases to be a stable reference point, the body enters a territory for which it was not designed. During these months, many inhabitants describe a very similar feeling: constant tiredness, apathy, difficulty concentrating. It is not necessarily deep sadness, but a kind of slow fading, a silent weariness that accumulates day after day. Here, depression is not often discussed as a clinical concept. People talk about feeling low, having no energy, getting through the winter. The language softens what the body and mind are experiencing. Various studies conducted in northern populations show a clear increase in insomnia, chronic fatigue, and emotional disturbances during the months with so little light. Not because people are more fragile, but because the brain loses its main external anchor, the natural cycle of the day. And when winter ends, the change is not gradual. The sun does not return slowly. It returns almost suddenly. In summer, the days are extremely long, and the light remains for hours and hours, creating the opposite sensation. At first, it seems like a gift. More energy, more activity, more life. But once again, the body becomes unbalanced. Now it doesn't know when to stop. Many residents have trouble sleeping, finding it difficult to disconnect and turn off their minds, even when physical exhaustion is evident. Some cover their windows with blackout curtains, cardboard, or even aluminum foil. Others simply accept that poor sleep is part of the price of living here. Because the problem is not just the darkness or just the light, but the sudden change between the two. The body never quite stabilizes. And when the body doesn't rest, the mind pays the price. Patience wears thin, emotions run high, and the wear and tear on people becomes part of the landscape as well. This mental exhaustion also has direct consequences on the way people relate to each other. Because in Yakutsk, winter doesn't just confine bodies inside heated houses. It confines entire lives in an increasingly reduced social space. The cold does not invite you to go out, improvise, or meet new people. Social life is concentrated in closed, warm, and familiar spaces. The same places, the same faces. Over time, anonymity ceases to exist almost completely. Added to this is a reality that we mentioned at the beginning. Many young women decide to leave Yakutsk. They seek education, jobs, cities with more options and less extreme climates, escaping the coldest city in the world. They seek a different life. Many men, on the other hand, stay. For work, for family, for roots, or simply because this place is the only one they know. The result is not immediately noticeable, but over the years it becomes evident. The social circle shrinks. Every year there are fewer new people, fewer choices, less room to start from scratch. Here you don't choose from many people. You choose from the same ones. And when the social world becomes so small, intimacy ceases to be a completely free choice and becomes an inevitable consequence. In cities like Yakutsk, even dating apps reflect how small this world is. Not because they work differently, but because there are so few people. After a few weeks, the faces are no longer new, the profiles repeat themselves, and the matches are no longer surprising. Sometimes you match with someone you already knew, or with someone you've crossed paths with many more times than you'd like. Everyone knows each other, by sight, by interaction, and in many cases, more than they'd like. Relationships tend to last longer, not always because of love, but because of a lack of alternatives or the real difficulty of breaking up and disappearing. Be that as it may, in this city everyone shares something. The feeling that living here forces you to live with yourself and with others, without too many escape routes. And yet, many stay. Not because it's easy, but because, after so long, this place is now part of who they are. Considering how small this world is, the forced proximity, and the fact that almost everyone here knows each other, sometimes even very intimately, there is something that changes everything. In Yakutsk, human error is not allowed. In other places, making a mistake usually has no consequences. You arrive late, you're cold for a while, you lose money, or you get a scare. But here, things are very different. A lapse in concentration, poor foresight, or a "I'll do it later" attitude can trigger a chain of problems that cannot always be reversed. Being stranded on the street in the middle of winter does not mean waiting. It can mean that your body starts to lose heat from the very first minute, even if you are well wrapped up. The cold does not act suddenly, it acts by wearing you down. First it numbs your fingers, then your face, then your head. And when your mind starts to fail, your decisions fail too. Heating is another critical point. It's not an extra. It's the basis of everything. If it fails, the house starts to cool down quickly. First the room temperature drops, then the objects, then the walls. And when a house loses heat, it's not always easy to recover it. In some cases, the interior can partially freeze, making it slow and dangerous to reheat. That's why many everyday decisions are conditioned by a single question. What if something goes wrong? That question is present when leaving, when returning, when working, when traveling, even when resting. There is no improvisation here. Not because people live in fear, but because the environment does not forgive improvisation. In Yakutsk, the cold does not need violence to impose itself. It just needs to wait. Wait for you to make a mistake. Wait for you to let your guard down. Wait for you to underestimate your surroundings. And when that happens, there are no quick second chances. There are no immediate solutions, only consequences. With all this in mind, it's normal to wonder, if living here is so hard, so demanding, and so unforgiving, why do they stay? There is no single answer. For some, it's family, parents, grandparents, children who have always lived here. Leaving is not just changing cities, it's breaking a shared history. For others, it's work. Professions linked to the territory, to the land, to the cold, to an economy that doesn't exist elsewhere. There's also habit. The body and mind adapt to what they know. For those who have grown up here, the cold is not a constant surprise. It's part of the landscape, part of the identity. Moving to another place can be as disorienting as staying for someone from outside. And there is something else that is difficult to explain: pride. The feeling of belonging to a place that does not give up easily, of living where others could not, of enduring where many would not last a week, not as a show, but as a personal conviction. They do not stay here because it is easy. They stay because leaving also has a price. Leaving means starting from scratch, leaving behind ties, routines, memories. It means being a stranger somewhere else. For many, that weighs as heavily as the cold. That's why, despite everything, Yakutsk is still alive. If you've made it this far and this story is making you see the world differently, give us a like now. It's the best way you can support us to keep making documentaries like this. After seeing how people live here, after understanding what it means to endure every day, the question is no longer about Yakutsk. The question is about you, about your comfort, about your limits, about what you would be willing to sacrifice. Because there are places where living is not a comfortable choice, but a constant decision. Places where every day is a test, and where staying is as brave as leaving. So now tell me, would you leave? Or would you be one of those who stay? Would you really change your place of residence to live in Yakutsk? I'll read your comments. If after seeing all this you're wondering if it's possible to travel to Yakutsk, how to get there, how much it costs, and what you need to take into account, here's a clear guide to planning your trip to one of the most extreme places on the planet. To begin with, the most common way to get there is by plane. Yakutsk has an international airport with connections from major Russian cities such as Moscow and St. Petersburg, and from there you can find connecting flights from other European or world capitals via intermediate stopovers. The train is possible, but it does not go directly to Yakutsk. The railway line ends in a nearby town on the other side of the Lena River. From there, the last leg is done by ferry in summer or on ice roads in winter, when the river freezes completely. It's an experience in itself, but a long and uncomfortable one. The city has a population of just over 300,000, making it a large city for Siberia, but small and isolated compared to any European capital. There is not an endless supply of hotels or tourist services. When it comes to accommodation, Yakutsk does not function as a classic tourist destination. There is not a wide variety of hotels or facilities designed to welcome thousands of visitors. In fact, there are few accommodations, which tells you a lot about the type of city it is. Even so, what is surprising is that prices are usually quite low. Not because it is a comfortable or cheap place to maintain, but because no one comes here just passing through and tourism does not drive the local economy. It is possible to find rooms in simple hotels for around $30 a night, and even slightly more comfortable options that exceed $50, depending on the time of year. There are also modest guest houses and lodgings, designed more for practical stays than for luxury. In Yakutsk, you don't pay for spectacular views or exclusive services. You pay for something much more basic, a warm, safe, and functional place to shelter from the cold. And in this place, that's enough. Food and drink prices are also quite affordable, although some imported products can be more expensive. For example, a simple menu in a restaurant can cost around $7 to $12, while a meal for two in a mid-range restaurant can cost around $30 to $40. An important point to consider when planning your visit is the time of year. Winter in Yakutsk is intense, and flights can be affected by severe weather, although the experience in that season will show you extreme cold in its most authentic form. The milder months, from spring to summer, make it easier to get around and explore the city and its surroundings with milder temperatures. In addition to the trip itself, Yakutsk is not visited like a European capital full of chain attractions. Here, the experiences are not designed to entertain, but to understand how people live in an extreme environment. One of the most striking attractions is the Permafrost Museum, built underground, where you can walk through tunnels dug directly into soil that has been frozen for thousands of years. It is not a visually spectacular museum, but it is disturbing. You are literally inside the permanent ice on which the entire city rests. There are also the local markets, where frozen food is sold outdoors without any artificial refrigeration. Fish, meat, traditional products, all exposed to the cold, which acts as a natural preservative here. Seeing how food is bought and sold in extreme temperatures is an experience that exists in almost no other place in the world. Outside the center, the surrounding area reveals the Siberian taiga, a vast expanse of forests, rivers, and frozen land surrounding the city. It is not a tourist-ready landscape. It is nature in its purest form. Any excursion must be done with local guides or with very careful planning, because getting lost here is not an option. It is a real risk. As for visas, if you have a passport from the European Union or most countries in the Americas, you will normally need to apply for a Russian visa before traveling, which should be done well in advance to avoid any setbacks. All this makes one thing clear. Yakutsk is not an impromptu destination. It is not a place you arrive at by chance or one you visit on a weekend without thinking. If you come here, it is because you have made a conscious decision to do so. And perhaps that is why those who arrive with respect and preparation do not just visit the coldest city in the world. They understand something much deeper, what it's like to live when your environment is not designed to make things easy for you. And if this has surprised you, wait until you see what's coming next. Because the story that follows in the next video you can see on screen is even more raw and profound.